Hello everyone and welcome to this walkthrough on how to create a data mapping configuration in the PlanetPress Connect DataMapper module. For the purpose of this demonstration, we will be using a text file. So let's get right into it and create a new data mapping configuration with that text file. Now, the very first step after creating a new data mapping configuration is to set up the boundaries of the source record. The boundaries are basically the separation between each of the source record, and the source record is all of the information that will go into the creation of one document for one client or one recipient. So how exactly do we determine or set the boundaries? Well, what we need to see or to find is what is always the same on the first page of an invoice, assuming you have multiple page invoices, or what changes only when a new invoice starts. There's a couple of ways that we could actually do it. For example, we could go and look at the invoice number, and when the invoice number changes, then we know that there's a new invoice. In this case, what we like to do is, because the text file that we have has the page 1 of something, then we can actually grab this text and then set it so that there's a new boundary or a new source record every time we see page 1 of, because we always know it's the first page, how many pages there are inside of the record. So what I did is perhaps a little bit of a shortcut in the sense that I selected what I wanted to check before selecting the onText trigger. If you didn't do that, so if you select the trigger first, you can actually reset the location where to find by clicking the Select the Area button, which is right here. And you can check for selected text or type in the text, or just use the Use Selected Text button that's here, which just loads whatever text is in the selection. So let's verify that the boundaries are set properly. Now, you may not have noticed it because I didn't point it out, but at the top right, the number of records, which is shown in the data model pane, is 100. Before I set my boundaries, this was 135. So we know there's 35 extra pages that are now part of the source records that are existing. Let's go on the second record. And on the second record, we can see that we have page 1 of 2, we have 2 pages. And if I scroll down, we have the second page, which is right under. So whatever number of pages are in my invoice, in this case, which is an invoice, we have all of the pages of that invoice for the client. Now, once our boundaries are set, once we have our delimited source records and they're properly defined, what we need to do, or what we can do, is to simply start extracting data. In the steps pane, we have the step-by-step process that will actually take the data from your source record and put it in the data model pane. Now, the actual process that you see here runs once for each source record, meaning every step that we add will be run for every single record. So for the 100 records that we have, it'll run 100 times. So let me extract a couple of things, and then we'll see exactly how this reacts or what this means. So the first thing I need to do is to select the data that I want to extract. So I'll select the customer information on the top right and hit the Add Extract Step button on the top. Now, when doing your extraction, there's actually a couple of ways to do it. I use the button on the top, but you could also right-click on the selection and then do the Add Extraction. You could just hit the shortcut key, which in this case is F6, or you could actually drag the selection directly into your record. Let me do that for the second selection. So here I can take the drag handle on the top right and simply bring it directly into the record. Okay, now what I did is I actually selected blocks of text and sent it into the data model pane. That created the extraction step on the left, and in that extraction step, we have two different extracted fields. I can show you the list at the bottom. In the step properties pane, you see all the properties for the currently selected step, which in this case is the extraction. So here we see two fields, the field 1 and field 2, but they each contain multiple lines. We actually want the ability to select each field individually. In order to do that, what we could do is to split the field into its multiple lines. If we want to have individual fields, and this is just a shortcut, instead of selecting each individual line and clicking on the add extraction. So in order to split a field, all you need to do is to select it in the field list, go a bit down, and select the split option. So now we have individual fields, and each of them contain the information that we want. So we have the customer ID, the invoice date, due date, invoice number, and rep number. But the fields aren't named properly, and we also captured an extra space that we don't actually want in there. So first thing that we can do is we can actually delete that extra space or that extra field. Now there's many ways that you can select an extracted field in order to change it or delete it. You can do it directly in the data model, and you can actually do it in the source record. And you can see that it actually selected it in the source record, the same as if we had clicked on it. Now we know that the field 6 is selected because in the step property, that is the one that appears in the field list dropdown, and all we need to do is to remove it. Now, what about the names? Well, there's a small little dialog here that you can access on the right, which is order and rename fields. And here we can rename all the fields one after the other. So let me do that right now. First of all, by entering the customer ID. And then I'll type in the rest. Now we're not going to rename the first field to field 2 because we want to split that one and also rename them. So what we have now is basically promotional information, meaning we have all the information for a specific client, the name, the address, and all of these. And we could actually use this information to create postcards, letters, or whatever. But we do have transactional information to take out. So because this is an invoice, we have the detail lines or the line items for this invoice. How do we extract them? Well, the first thing that we need to do is to tell the data mapper where that information starts. In the case of this invoice, whatever record we have, the information always starts at the same place. It's always on line 25. That's pretty obvious to us, but it's not automatic it would always be there. There could be invoices where there's added information or the number of lines is variable, so you have to find a way to bring the pointer or where the extraction starts at that location. Because in our case it's simple, we know the line is always 25, all we need to do is to select it and add the go-to step. So the go-to step determines where we will be starting our repeating loop that will extract all of the line items or the details. The next thing we want to do is to select where that loop will end. So let me scroll down. And what we need to do is to determine where these line items stop. Now, of course, there is the break where we have page 2 of 2 and all of the information that's repeated. That's the header for page 2. We'll be ignoring that or doing a condition to ignore that right after. But we do need to determine where the line items stop. Again, in this case, we made our life easy. We have an invoice that has a subtotal line. That string, that subtotal text is always there right after the last item on the last line item. All we need to do is to select it and click on the repeat step. So other than looping through each of the lines, the repeat step doesn't actually do anything. But we can see on the left that it does loop through each and every single line, and it's waiting for you to add an action or to add what you want within that loop. Of course, we don't want to add the header information, we don't want to extract that, so we need to find a way to detect when it is a line item and when it is not. Again, in this case, it has a pretty straightforward approach. What we can do is we can actually check for the dot inside of the line item total. So each of our line items here has a dot in the end, and the dot doesn't appear anywhere else. So again, it depends on your exact data source, but in this case, we know that it corresponds to reality and we can safely use the dot. So to add a condition, I did the selection and I click on the Add Condition button. And almost magically, we have all of the header lines of the page 2 that are ignored. It doesn't have a dot, so it disappears. So this means that in the condition, when we are in the true branch, when we do an extraction or do anything else, all of these lines are simply ignored, they're skipped. We don't need to care about them. Now at the bottom of the screen, we have the subtotals, and these are not conditioned. We don't have the condition checking on there because the loop or the repeat step actually ends at the subtotal line. It doesn't go through with it. So our loop ends there and that's it. So we have a perfect loop, a perfect condition that'll let us extract only the information that we need, only on the lines that we need them. So let's do the extraction. So when I extract my first item, which is the product number, on the right, there's something special that happens. We have a detail table that appears. The detail table is something of a subtable inside of our record. Now we have the first line item, and we can browse through each of those lines that are inside the repeat. So all of the information that we extracted, we can browse through them and see each and every one of them. The detail table, that's what we call it. The detail table is used inside of the designer to create dynamic tables that are of variable height. So when you're creating an invoice, whether the client has 2 or 250 items, it'll stretch the table to fit. So this means that when we switch record, we can have a different number of detail lines or line items or whatever you want to call them. So let me extract the rest of the fields and rename them, and we'll be right back. So now that the line items have been properly extracted and named, there's only one thing left to go and extract. At the bottom of the invoice, we have all our subtotals, the taxes, the totals, etc. The beauty of having the loop and the condition as we have them is that the loop ends at the last line item. So all we need to do now is to just extract them because they're already at the last location. Whatever number of line items we have, since the loop ends there, we know that the numbers are always right under that last line. Up until now, the way we built our process, we're always at the right location. However, in this case, we need to select the appropriate location, which is the end of the repeat. So let me click on it. And then we'll go at the bottom and add the extraction for the subtotals. And as usual, we'll split and rename the fields individually. So there's one last thing that we need to do to have a complete data mapping configuration. Each of the fields that we have here can have a different type. In the designer application, there's a couple of special things that we can do when we have the appropriate data types, such as a currency, so a price, or a date, or a number, and things like that. In order to set the proper data type, we need to click on the extract field and change its properties. And we'll change that into a data type, basically. Now, here's the important thing to know about the data type. The way that we put the data format is how the data is read in the source record, not how it's going to be displayed later. Meaning, we are converting from a text-based format into the appropriate data type, so we need to tell the data mapper how to read the data. So here in the invoice date and the due date, the way that the date is written is how we need to reproduce it in the format. So let me do that for you. And one thing you'll notice, as soon as I click outside of the window, the extraction error will disappear and the record data will be back. The reason they were gone is that when the data format does not match, it actually causes an error saying, I can't read the data here, doesn't correspond to what I'm expecting, so I will exit. And when that happens, all of the following steps inside of your process will stop working also. This is why most of the data has disappeared. Okay, so on the right, we now see the invoice date is a bit different. It is written in a specific format that is actually just a JavaScript way of writing a date time visually. I'll do the same for the due date. And now we'll move on to the next item. So the other data type that we want to show you is the currency data type, which is used for the subtotals and the unit price and total in the line items. Now again, because the defaults are not what is written in the file, we immediately have an error in that extract. As you can see, we have the currency sign. We can remove that. And we'll also change the decimal separator, which is a dot and not a comma. And now that'll start working. So at this point, now that I've set the data type for the rest of the items that we had, we have a fully functional data mapping configuration. So now the walkthrough is complete. If you want more information or details on how to extract data from different data source types, you can go on the OL Learn website and take a look at the PlanetPress Connect course, and you will have a lot more information in there. So thank you for watching and see you next time.